Thank you guys for joining us today as we welcome the Executive Officer at the Home Builders Association of St. Joseph Valley, Bob Penrose, to discuss how the pandemic is changing construction. According to Realtor magazine, we are currently experiencing a persistent inventory crunch that is only getting worse. And there is potential for a new home construction boom. So we think this information is that Bob's going to be providing today is going to be very beneficial to our members here in 2021. So thanks again, Bob, for being here, and go ahead.
Well, thank you, Carlin. I appreciate the intro, and thank you to the Realtors Association for inviting me to talk today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so you can choose whether you want to see my face or not. It won't hurt my feelings. If you just want to see the full screen, that is just fine. So let me click this button here. All right. Okay. So thanks again for inviting me to speak today. My name is Bob Penrose. I'm the Executive Officer of the local Home Builders Association. We're centered here right in St. Joseph County, but we serve the broader Michiana area. I was invited to speak on how the pandemic is changing new construction or changing housing. And at first, I'll be honest, I thought to myself, well, I'm really not sure if it's changed much yet. It's only been a year, although it seems like a long year. But I think that we can see some trends that are starting to emerge, and we can talk about the current state of construction, housing, and learn from that and sort of forecast forward what we think that's going to do. So I tried to find a picture that would, indicate how the pandemic is changing construction. And this is the only thing I could come across. And then I thought, is that really what it's like? I don't know how many job sites you guys have been on, but it doesn't really look like that. So we'll go back to this. And I like it because we're looking ahead at sort of creating a vision for where we're at, what we're expecting to see. So my overview for today is going to be, we're going to talk about factors that are impacting building and how that's affecting our builders and how that is being impacted by buyer preferences. I'd like to look at trends and see which ones we think are temporary and which ones we think might be here to stay. And then kind of highlight a few things to watch, some of my favorite trends to watch. And then, of course, if I don't sprinkle it in, we'll cover a section at the end which highlights some of our local insights on that, some of the local builders' perspectives on what the national trends are and how they're being seen here as well. So let's start with how which factors are impacting our builders, which is what influences the cost of new construction. As we know, that new home construction continues to defy expectations. There was a slight sort of speed bump in April of last year, and beyond that, it has been pretty much stronger than anybody expected it would be. 2020 ended the year even higher than the projections were, even despite the first quarter being a little slower. And demand is still very high. A lot of that demand for new construction is coming from people who want to, they're spending more time in their homes, and we'll cover a little bit of that later. But first, it's important to look at the big picture, and that is a lot of the construction influences, a lot of the factors that impact our builders are not new. They're just being exaggerated by the last 12 months and this new impact. So if we look at this chart, we're looking at two side by side, and these are surveys that are done by our National Association of Home Builders. One on the left is 2019, and then looking ahead to 2020, compared to 2020 looking ahead to 2021. And I want to highlight a few of the differences here. So we're going to look at each of these individually. But you can see that we'll also see that there's a lot more in similarity than there are differences. In 2019, looking ahead to 2020, the biggest challenge that builders were facing was the availability of labor. And that continues to be a huge, huge factor. But it also, we're going to see that material prices and government regulation costs are still right up there. And so if we look at this, there are, you won't see one line item for government regulation, but you're going to see the cost of developing lots, inspections and fees for hookups, environmental regulations and policies. So there isn't one line item. There's actually about 4 or 5 that are lumped together in what I'm going to call regulatory costs. As we jump then back to 2020 and what we're looking ahead to in 2021, building material prices has taken the lead, and it's actually the top 2 costs. Top 2 items are both the prices and the availability, and they're actually they're not new, but they've been exaggerated to the point where they've actually eclipsed the availability of labor. Still in here, we have 3 or 4 different items that are all sort of categorized as regulatory. So the big 3 are still the same. The big 3 challenges to builders, and especially new construction: regulatory costs, labor shortages, and supply of materials. So let's look at those individually. Regulatory costs can sometimes amount to 30% of the cost of a new home, and that doesn't necessarily has not necessarily been impacted by the last 12 years. The last 12 months. The regulatory fees are about the same as they were, but they're not getting any better, and that's for sure. Here's another example, a survey that was done by the National Association of Home Builders. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that one. This is where we were in the red bars, as you can see, are 2020, and where the builders are expecting them to go in 2021. Again, not necessarily directly related to the pandemic, but it's certainly not, none of these are going down. Really, none of these are going to be easier for builders. They're continuing to be a challenge that they face. The next one, what I'm calling the big 3 challenges to builders: labor shortages. Sorry, I think I have the slides out of order. We actually, so we're skipping labor shortage. We're coming back to supply of materials. Lumber prices are just one indicator. This is actually being seen in a lot of different building materials as well. Even I'm starting to hear reports of flooring. You hear about luxury vinyl planking, luxury vinyl tile. Some of the petroleum products that are used into the manufacturing of those products are becoming short in supply, and what we're looking at with new administration and new government regulations impacting those, we might see this impacting a lot more than just lumber. But lumber prices are a strong indicator of all of the building materials and supplies that are being impacted right now. We peaked, we hit an all-time high last fall, and then there was a dip, but it was unfortunately very temporary. And now, as of last week, 2 weeks ago, we're seeing that the numbers are even higher than they were. So we're currently at an all-time high for lumber prices. that is directly impacted by the pandemic, but it is also more than that. The indicators were there for a while, but now we're starting to see that this has sort of it has magnified, exaggerated an already existing issue. The National Association of Home Builders is lobbying almost daily to try to figure out what is going on with the lumber supply. Um, Part of what happened last year is that the milling and the production facilities closed for a period of time. And at the same time, the demand just kept right on going. We didn't really, like I mentioned earlier, we didn't really see a slowdown in the demand for new construction. In fact, we saw an increase, and we saw an increase in remodeling, and that demand just kept pushing and ran us out of all of the inventory. And at the same time, there are tariff issues with Canadian softwood lumber, but the National Association is trying to answer and address these, but they're really not 100% sure of all the factors that are at play here. So, so I'll come back to, we'll talk about this a little bit more as it's being addressed by our local builders and kind of their feedback on it too. Other pandemic related challenges as reported by builders. We're going to see more of the same. Shortages and delays in obtaining building materials is, almost 100% of builders that were surveyed by this survey have responded that this is a major or at least a minor issue. You're going to see, again, local jurisdictions that goes into the regulatory costs and regulatory delays that they deal with, and then difficulty in finding workers to work on construction sites. So again, it's really all, if there is a silver lining to the past 12 months, it is probably in the fact that labor is not the number one challenge that they're facing now. We actually saw a slight increase in the amount of workers in the construction workforce. I would say that part of that is due to the fact that a lot of states were recognized, construction was recognized as an essential industry, and workers were able to find work, and it kind of attracted some workers back to the workforce. Now it's still a huge issue. There was already an overwhelming demand for skilled labor, and that continues. But if there is a silver lining, it hasn't gotten worse in the last 12 months, like we see in the other challenges that builders are facing. Let's, despite the challenges though, it's interesting that the National Association does a survey called the Builder Confidence Index. And I don't have a slide for that, but builder confidence is at an all-time high. It hit an all-time high in the fall, dropped a little bit since then, but it's currently at an 82 on a scale of 1 to 100, where they feel like anything over 50 is pretty good. Builder confidence hit like 90. So they are optimistic, and a lot of it is because there's so much demand that they can, they're able to build as many houses as they possibly can. So there is some good news in terms of the new construction industry, although I'm not really sure that locally we're going to be able to address the demands, and I suspect we're in for a little bit of a longer period of time before things really start to get better. But let's turn our attention now to let's shift our focus to homes, features, and buyer preferences. It's important to keep this in perspective for the in the big picture, because the NAHB did a survey last year. How has the pandemic impacted your housing preferences? And 67% said no, that it has not. That buyers still basically want what they thought they wanted before. They're not necessarily impacted by it. So 2/3 of buyers are, I wouldn't say they're unswayed by it, but it's really a minority that we're looking at. But I think we can dig in and find some useful trends to pull out and learn from the 25% who said yes, that the pandemic has impacted their housing preference. Of those 25% who said yes to that survey, 90% of those had someone working from home, either a telemarketer or a student, teleworker or a student, not a telemarketer. It could be, there's a lot of those too. Either a student at home or a worker at home or both. And so we can see that that's going to have a big impact on the ones who said they were impacted. This is primarily why they were impacted and why their housing preferences are changing. So I'd like to spend a little time looking at temporary versus permanent. What have we observed, and which ones do we think are here to stay? So on the left side of this chart, we have and this is based on a survey and that was done by a national housing advisory company. But I've kind of taken a lot of it, and I've studied it. I think it kind of makes sense. So on the left side, we're going to see things that we've noticed, trends we've noticed, but we think they're mostly temporary. You think about virtual education, the thing we're doing right now, having an online Zoom webinar. It's probably not a permanent change. It's not going to be something we're going to always do Zoom webinars forever. We saw the statistics show that women were leaving the workforce in big numbers, and that's probably temporary. Interesting to call out here is working from home is on here twice. Working from home as a full-time, always working from home is probably temporary, but part-time working from home is what we think is permanent. And that, again, it varies a lot based on the type of industry you're working in, the type of the person. It varies according to pay and income as well. So the more money that you make, the type of job that you have, you're more likely to have the flexibility or the at least the choice to work from home part-time. And those people are choosing to work from home more. And that'll probably stick around. On the somewhere in the middle, the city life has temporarily been impacted, but those cities provide a cultural magnet for a lot of arts and activities, and they probably will return. But there are new trends developing that are probably a little bit more going to stick around. Food and delivery services are, grocery delivery, it's way up last year, and we're going to see that continue. And then there are also trends that we thought that were already in place: automation, outsourcing, the hit to in-person retail. A lot of that is here to stay, was in place pre-pandemic, and is going to be pushed even further in the wake. So then I want to highlight some items on this list that are impacted by that have a direct impact on housing. All of these items are related to housing in some way, either where they're living or how they're living. And the southern migration is something I want to just hit on really quickly. Where are people choosing to live, and what are desirable locations? So again, some of this is national. I don't want to get too far into the national because I don't feel like that's necessarily the purpose of today. I want to spend more time on locally. But interestingly, we are seeing huge numbers in population growth in Texas, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina. And when you compare that to the rest of the United States, Florida and Texas alone were more than double the population growth of the rest of the United States combined. Top cities for population growth: Dallas, Houston, Atlanta. Again, you're seeing all the same cities that are in Texas and Atlanta. except for Atlanta, you're seeing Texas, Florida, those are hitting this list again. Just for comparison, the entire state of California population growth was 37,000, less, and that is less than Dallas. So the city of Dallas saw more population growth last year than the entire state of California. So the National Association likes to refer to a suburban shift. And this is something that I think they would say this is beginning, and you're going to continue to see this over the next couple of years. People are choosing to move out of rural areas, out of downtown areas, and moving into suburbs, and not even close in suburbs, but more outlying suburbs. We're going to see this slide again later, so I want to keep moving, but a lot of this is directly related or can be attributed to a pandemic related cause. There may have been a trend being, before, but it's definitely something that it can be recorded now. So then what about inside the home? I want to talk about home feature preferences. And I've got 3 different studies that we're going to compare, and they're all telling us kind of the same story. And so I'm going to focus on some of the similarities. One is a survey that was reported by builders. So what buyers are asking of builders. Another is a survey of home buyers. And then the other one also buyers, what they consider to be their must-have items and they're desirable to have in their next home. So first, as reported by builders, what are our buyers asking, and what do they think, what are they asking builders for? So not surprisingly, 80% of the correspondents that were asked said that their buyers are asking for a home office. You'll see suburbs showing up here again really high. And then another one we're going to talk about later, exterior amenities. Those are really the huge kind of effects that we're seeing across all of the that we're going to see in all of the surveys that we look at. Not necessarily larger homes either. We did see a slight increase in home sizes nationally. The average had been declining and it's starting to level off now. And so it's really about what's, the components of that home. So this is a different survey of home feature preferences. What are the components that buyers consider to be high priorities in your next home? Not surprisingly, and and knowing enough realtors, I know that it's always about kitchens and baths, right? That's what everybody always says. That's the old standby. And so not surprisingly, we're seeing large kitchens show up here. Garage is really important. But then a designated office room, a big backyard. The 4th and 5th items on this list are both backyard. So let me go to this one. A big backyard, or a backyard, it doesn't have to be big, but I want to be able to socialize. I want to entertain. And then it's back to the bathroom and some of the other features that are kind of always there. Office and flex space we see show up here in 5 different categories. So office room, or I want to customize my house. I included guest bedroom in here because we're, it kind of fits into the flexible space category. Don't need a designated home gym, but I want flexible space. I don't need a designated office. So if we think about a designated office and then an office type space, it's actually on here twice. And then we already talked about the importance of outdoor living. So there are really there are kind of 3 key factors that I want to talk about. Another one, but first, before I get into the big 3 that are sort of trends to watch, I want to talk about one that may be a little bit more temporary: schoolrooms. This was huge in 2020, but maybe not huge. This was significant, right, in 2020. But now that schools are starting to go back, do we think this is going to stick around? And the answer is, I don't know, maybe. The schoolroom idea may be temporary. But I think that we will see that when that some of these rooms could easily be converted or to become a flexible space. They could be a craft room or a home office, very easily. Or parents might find that their child responds better having a designated space to do their homework. So I think it's a little too soon to know whether this is a temporary trend, but it's certainly not as big as the three. Now, multi-utilitarian use of space is a huge concept right now. We saw it show up on all of the studies. People don't necessarily want a designated home office, but they definitely want something. If they don't, they definitely want to consider that or have a place. Um, Using a space as more than one thing, or it could be easily sort of transitioned. It's not necessarily designed that way, but people are making it happen. They're making it work. So an important trend that is going to be multi-utilitarian use. And yeah, that's a word. I looked it up. So finding additional spaces, finding spaces that can be converted from one use to another or that are flexible. Another important design trend to watch, the creative use of space. So, this is a front entryway, but it also doubles as an office space. Using under stairs for storage, finding a spot, to a little nook to put your office if you don't have a designated office space. Nationally, design trends are starting to look at how to learn from the creative use of space in RV design and boat design, where they have a limited amount of space available. It's compact. They want to do a lot with a little, and I think we'll see that as a recurring theme throughout a lot of this. Murphy beds, for example, are more popular than they were before. Just the ability to have an office, but it could also be a guest room, but it's not necessarily always a guest room. So, and at the risk of making this look like an Instagram or what is it? I guess the other one is Pinterest. Like it's a Pinterest slideshow with all these different photos. But I thought we should show some examples because this is basically what we're seeing as a big trend. I even saw a YouTube video on how to build an office in your garage. And so if you have a nice garage that doesn't, smell as bad as mine with the lawnmower parked in there, then maybe you can work out there as well. So examples of basically people adapting and becoming creative to try to find try to find flexible spaces, get more out of the home spaces that they do have. And this is driving not only new construction needs and wants, but also remodeling. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but remodeling has hit, an all-time high as well. So let's look at one more survey and kind of compare most wanted features, must-haves, and desirables. This is a survey, another survey done by the National Association of Home Builders. The things that are the top 10 most wanted, and actually I think there are more than 10 on here, but the most wanted features as surveyed by home buyers. Again, we're seeing some of the same things. There's some features on here that are just always going to be in demand. But what's interesting is some of the ones that start to pop up and are really high on the top. And this is everything that you could possibly want in a home. We're seeing patio in the top 5, front porch, top 6. That's going to be another feature that I'm going to talk about later. Not only are we focused on using the space inside of our homes to the most value, but people are looking for how can I get more livable space elsewhere too. And outdoor living is huge right now. Um, so another aspect of their survey, most wanted specialty rooms. And I thought this was interesting because a laundry room is big, dining room, great room, or living room, but cracking in the top 5 is the home office. Most wanted specialty rooms, which I think is telling because this is, to make it into the top 5 is pretty important. Most wanted outdoor features. Now this is some of these you already saw that are in the top 10 overall, but we're seeing that exterior lighting, patio, front porch, rear porch, deck, all are geared toward outdoor living, using that space as well. All of these are wanted by 75% or more of home buyers. And so these are on this list because a lot of people are asking for them. The other thing to note is, and this is across all price points, but then as you start to drill in on the higher price points, the more valuable homes, the higher price point you get, the more you start to see things like outdoor kitchen, fireplace, and built-in grill hitting that. And I think that if we look at sort of the culture of everybody wants to have everything, no matter what price point you're at, even if you only are spending 200, 250, new home at 300,000, you're going to want these features too. It's not just reserved for the high end, but the fact that they're on those lists, it means that there's a trickle down, right? So again, finding the value in the square footage that you have these are basically the biggest 3 trends that I've researched and I've seen in all of these surveys and in talking to our builders. Flexible spaces, outdoor living spaces, and then in our area, this is not necessarily popular in Florida, but in our area especially, finished basements. So I had one builder tell me that hardscapes are huge right now, and and as we start to hit the warmer months, we're going to start to see the demand for this is going to skyrocket. Decks and hardscapes are definitely a trend to watch, and this one actually has all 3. Outdoor living space that incorporates a kitchen and a deck and a fire pit, seating area for entertaining. We see an example of outdoor living that's partially covered. Patios, again, as I mentioned, porches. Finding a way to sort of expand your living space into the outside just gives you more value compared to the average, price of the square footage of your home. So here we are again with the Pinterest slideshow. We're just showing all these beautiful hardscapes, fire pits. Another example, fireplace and TV. I mean, we're literally just bringing the living room outside under a roof. And I think it's important to kind of dwell on this for a second, because one of the aspects of this is that we're incorporating the idea of fresh air. And the clean air aspect is, I think, something that the pandemic is causing us to think about and to make these even more in demand. It's not always necessarily the high-end construction either. These are, this one and the next one, pretty modest homes based on kind of the surroundings but they've converted their covered patio to have a fireplace and a TV for entertaining. Some are a little bit more lavish, especially when we start to talk about outdoor kitchens, outdoor bars, and built-in grills. But this is something that people are going to want more and more of. The other thing is convertible space or combined space, bringing the outside in and bringing the inside out. I kind of jumped ahead of myself a little by mentioning the clean air, but that's one of the trends that we're seeing. And there's an entire section coming up on that's basically health and wellness. And I think that that's impacting the need and the desire for indoor, outdoor spaces to kind of help us to bring in more fresh air, and get outside a little bit more, and use those space. Okay, I'm going to skip through some more of these slides. I mentioned finished basements. I think we all know what finished basements look like, but people are starting to use these as, um, there's, and especially in new construction, there is an increasing trend to go ahead and finish the basement during the construction process rather than wait. A lot of builders were allowing for the option to finish it later, but now buyers are, increasingly just demanding that happen during the build. Just right up front, go ahead and finish the basement because we want all that extra livable space. So health and wellness. I kind of it didn't really show up directly on the polls, but it's there in a lot of other aspects, a lot of surveys that are being done about why people are kind of reconsidering their homes. When you look at it in terms of, I guess how the pandemic has changed the way people perceive their home. It used to be more of a place of that I live here and then I go away for a while and I come back. And now people are thinking more in terms of what is my home, sort of what's it like when I'm in it more, when I'm spending more time how is my home responding to me? How does it affect my daily life rather than just a place where I'm coming home and eating and sleeping? It pre-pandemic was more like what's it like when I leave, and now it is more like, does it provide me with my health and safety? There's an increased awareness of the air quality, the surfaces, how am I keeping it clean? I'm trademarking this phrase, clean is the new green. So you heard it here first. What I mean by that is, if you think back to 30, 40 years ago, maybe even earlier, there was a huge shift toward green building, sort of environmentally friendly, certifications in how to build green, energy efficiency. The focus was on how does my home fit better within the environment. I think that if you look at the last 30 years and how that has sort of shifted and become more mainstream, more normal, I think that health and wellness and the cleanliness of our home is going to be in people's minds, it's in their consciousness, and we could see a huge shift, whereas 30 years from now, it could be just a regular part of how we look at our homes. Behavioral changes. After spending more time at our home, people kind of rediscovered what it's like to live there, and they realized that their home maybe wasn't built to live in 24/7, 365, and that's caused people to want to change things, want to upgrade, want to remodel or add on. And also ultimately it's driving new construction, because then they think, well, if I'm going to make this many changes to my home, why don't I just build a new one that's exactly the way I want it to be? And so that's driving new construction, and the demand is higher than we've seen. So principles of a healthy home that people are thinking about: continuous fresh air. We talked about how that impacts our indoor and outdoor living spaces. People are starting to become more informed about the products they're being used and the construction of their home. And they're choosing, we saw trends in choosing non-toxic materials for cleaning supplies, and then developing healthy home habits. How is that impacting our behavior? And so I think builders are in the same way that builders started to look at what is the energy efficiency of my home? How can I build it to be more environmentally friendly, and more, energy efficient? The questions that I think should be asked now are, what materials are being used in the homes? How can we integrate a healthy design and a lot of that is how to encourage healthy habits. Maybe their drop zone is, maybe we're taking off our shoes at the drop zone. The homeowner entryway becomes an important sort of vestibule. Um, are we changing our filters more often? How often are we, having vents cleaned? Things like that are, going to become more at the forefront of people's minds. Um, and that, okay, so the other thing is not just physical well-being, but mental well-being as well. And so there's a little bit of a trend. It's not, it's not huge, but drawing from what we know about neuroscience, if our homes are messy, that makes us feel bad about our environment. And so organization has become even more popular than it has been. And people are starting to create escape rooms, not escape rooms in the sense that I think of them in gaming, but escape spaces that are more, this is where I retreat to focus on my mental well-being, whether it is a craft room or a library. Here's a nice example of like a little reading nook that kind of looks to me like an escape where people can kind of get away from the clutter or the madness. And even if they're in their home all the time, this is sort of a sanctuary space that they can go to. It may be different for some people. It may be more of a bar or a sports bar kind of a setting. Whatever it is that people feel that they need to escape. I mean, that's kind of the point, is that people are focused on their well-being. So going back to my clean is the new green, there are all kinds of certifications, tests, and compliance related websites and programs and federal guidelines that people can become certified in health and wellness related. The Hayward score, for example, you can do a quiz on your own that will tell you how healthy is your home based on how you answer these questions. And builders can become certified in these now, and I think it will become increasingly, it'll follow a similar trend to LEED certified or green building certified. I could imagine certifications for these becoming, more in demand as we go forward. So these home features are directly influenced by health and wellness. The owner entry or drop zone is kind of where we see, kind of it could be a gateway. People may consider that to be, well, this is, this is where the outside world comes into the house, but then we, kind of have a changeover, kind of a clean room or a transition space. The rest of these features all focus on what makes my home easy to live in, relaxing, rejuvenating, and safe. One item, a note: pet spaces. That I was confused by that too, because pet spaces, I guess that means for the purpose of this list, it's a place for your pet outside, not necessarily a dedicated pet room, right? Or because we actually found that one of the surveys that I read, pet grooming or a pet bath like station actually shows up on the top 10 don't want list, like the things people want to avoid having or don't want to buy in their homes. So pet spaces is really, but pets, it's interesting to note because I think I've got a slide here later that will demonstrate the pets. In this, you may consider this to be, pretty far into the future, but if we think about the homeowner entry or the drop zone being more of like a vestibule, the technology is being developed and is already there for in an extreme case. It's something to keep your eye on. I don't know how likely it would be, but within a few years, you could potentially, if you wanted to, have a zone in your home, have a vestibule where you would come in from the outside world your body could be washed with UV, and then you could, move into your home in sort of a safe environment. To me, I mean, personally, it sounds a little extreme, but then again, the technology is there to be able to do it, and it could be something to watch. Um, I have to have something on here to be sort of wild and futuristic, right? And I mentioned pets. Pet ownership went way up last year. Almost 50% of homes own a pet, um, and and that's an interesting trend. I don't know what you do with that, but other than making sure that you have some kind of a yard for your pet, or a way for your pet to live with you. Um, and another one that is still too far out there, but it did show up on a couple of lists, and that is connectivity to the internet. It's becoming more and more important, especially with those 25% who have a student or a worker working from home. Keep your eye on whether fiber or some kind of disruption might happen in the way that internet is being provided to your homes. Okay, so the local perspective, and I know I'm getting a little long-winded, but I hope you guys are still with me. I hope this is still interesting. Local perspective on these, we've already talked about all of these things in the presentation so far. Remodeling is huge, finding value in the square footage, outdoor living spaces, and these were all mentioned by local builders and remodelers as things that their consumers are asking for. So they've basically confirmed the national trends are happening here in our Michiana area as well. It may just be a handful of people have started to ask, does my HVAC filter out COVID? But we are also seeing trends that make it meaningful. Other feedback from our local builders, consumers are more informed. And I think this is a continuation of the internet era, right? We all have access to a million pieces of information at any point. And homeowners are more involved and educated and informed about what goes into their home and how it's built and how the process works. And we saw a ton of pictures in this slideshow. There are examples of things people want. And so people are more and more knowledgeable about what they want and don't want. We also have some confirmation of this suburban shift. That is, I'll show you a local example of that in here in a second. But again, overwhelmingly, these are, to put this into the big picture perspective again, overwhelmingly, the traditional factors that drive consumers are still there. What school system is my house in? If I have a family, that'll always be important. How far am I from retail? Things like that. The location, the neighborhood I live in, those are continuing to drive more consumer interest than any temporary ones. But there is a shift in some of the trends like we're talking about today. Remodeling and additions, I think we've covered it all, but I'll throw in some local perspective on that. Our website at hbasjv.com has categories of all of our members, and in addition to builders, right behind it is remodeling. And if you factor in certain keyword searches and look at just the category searches, remodeling shows up 3 times more than any other specific search that people are doing. So remodeling and additions have been huge here at the local level and continue to be to drive those. And this was mentioned by a couple of different builders. Suburban shift, just a reminder of the slide we talked about earlier. People are choosing to live in the suburban area. A couple of our builders mentioned that they have buyers that are coming from Chicago. They're coming from DC area. And a lot of it is they have discovered that they can work from home, and so they can work from anywhere, particularly in Chicago. And I think it was actually a realtor study that said that something like 17 or 19% of the searches that are done for people moving out of Chicago, they're searching for the South Bend area. And so that is, we're going to see more and more of that. I think in our particular case, just speculating that, if you're 2 to 3 hours away from Chicago and you're able to work from home the majority of the time, you're still close enough to be able to get back to your office when you need to. So it's not something that, that I think that, I'm just kind of putting two and two together. But it's confirmed by our locals too. So at this point, I think I've covered everything that was just really, really pressing that I really wanted to say, but I'm happy to cover, any number of other topics. I didn't talk about the macroeconomics of home prices and home building and demographic information, but I'm happy to cover anything that you guys might have questions for. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Does anybody have any questions at all? I didn't see any in the chat, but go ahead and.
I can always come up with a question or two.
Thank you, Dale.
No, I want to say, Bob, excellent job. It's really good information, and you must have done a lot of work to put that together. I think it's interesting, like, because of the pandemic, like the move to the suburbs. I don't know that we really have, people fleeing our urban areas to our suburb areas here, but we've got people fleeing Chicago, right? Who know our home prices are so much better here. So that's interesting. I guess the one question I have, you kind of touched on for building material prices, they're going up, they fluctuate. Is that a combination of both some shortages because of the pandemic and production, and just sustained high demand?
Yes, it's both of those. Yeah, it's absolutely a combination of the demand is as high as it's ever been. Both building and remodeling use pretty much the same building materials, and so whether you're looking at new construction or upgrading your home, local builders are starting to combat that and maybe adapt to it. I think one of the slides, it showed a dip in sort of projecting forward to 2021. There was a little bit of optimism that building materials and supply shortages would be better than they were last year. I think it's optimistic, and I think that builders are adapting. For example, kitchen cabinets that used to take 2 or 3 weeks start taking 2 or 3 months. They might order them earlier in the process.
You can come on.
It becomes difficult when you're talking about they're really not building a lot of speculation homes anymore. They try to, but they're selling them even during the build process. So they're kind of ordering ahead of where ordering cabinets for houses they haven't started yet, for example. They are also, trying to just find new sources, new vendors. I think it's really more of an adaptation to their process. I think that suppliers have told me that things are going to be getting better in a couple months, but I don't know if we really know that. We thought lumber prices had peaked, and then they sort of yo-yoed right back up again. So I think nationally it's a real issue. And then to your other question about people leaving the Chicago area, another aspect of that, and I think if you look at Texas and Florida, for example, people are moving to states with lower taxes, more affordability. So Illinois taxes are higher than Indiana. If you're living in Chicago, you're paying higher taxes, you're paying higher real estate costs to live there. So people are looking at, finding more value in their money. And so they're moving to those states. Um, Someone in the chat asked, are there enough buildable lots in St. Joe County? Are there enough? I think that's kind of, I guess, perspective, but I would say that most of the builders would say no. They're looking for more places to build. They're sort of hanging on to the ones they've got, making sure there is competition for lots, especially in the better, sort of nicer parts of the county. But they're also looking at moving to places like New Carlisle, Lakeville. Some of it's driven by schools too. So you're going to start to see a little bit more building in those kind of outlying areas. And the national data would support that too, because those would be outlying suburbs rather than close in suburbs. If you think about South Bend being the urban center, of the county. And I think you also asked a question about the lowest price. Let me find this one.
What is the lowest entry price for which our local builders will build a home?
Thank you. So it's higher than it used to be. I would say that you're going to need to spend, whereas, a couple of years ago, you could maybe do an entry level new construction home down around 200,000. It's really going to be more like 300 now. It's impacted greatly by the customization of the home, how many upgraded features you want, what kind of materials that you would choose in the build process. But I think it's really difficult to find something, under 250,000 that is new construction. And it's really about supply and demand, and it's about the traditional market forces. Builders are at capacity. They're sort of at the amount of houses that they can comfortably build in a year. And they don't want to tell someone they can build a house for them later to not be able to fulfill that promise. So I think you're going to see that by the end of May or early June this year, a lot of the houses for this year are going to be sold. New construction, you're going to be looking at maybe next year. Their capacity is already as high as it can be. And so I think at the beginning of the talk, we talked about, can we build more houses? And the Realtors Association, we probably would love for our builders to just build more houses so we have more inventory. But the problem is they're really at capacity, especially with the labor shortage, the materials. They're not able to build more than they can build now. And then when you factor in, if I can only build 20 houses this year, I'm probably going to build the ones that provide me the greatest profit margin. And so that shifts the price up too. And then the demand for pre-owned houses is shifting the prices even higher. Interestingly, I think it's interesting, nationally, if you look at the trend of home prices, they're both going up. Pre-owned houses are going up and new homes are going up, but the gap between them is shrinking. So it's becoming easier and easier to sort of jump from, if I can only afford 300,000 for my home, I can jump to 330 and build a new home. That gap might be narrowing and causing more people to jump into new construction. So
did you see the follow-up on that question? She asked if that 300,000 entry level, does that include the lot price in that, or that's just basically for the house?
That would include a lot. I would think. The lot is going to vary a lot, quite a bit based on where you're building to. So if you already have a lot that you want to build on, then you're in a great position to be able to attract a builder, to hire a builder to build on that. That certainly helps.
Somebody else asked, are you still seeing fireplaces, gas logs?
Yeah. I think that probably is confirmed by the people want sort of comfortable spaces. They want to feel like, they're spending more time at home. They want those escape route areas. People are spending time, I guess, and spending money upgrading their space, and that's why you're not seeing home sizes increase very much. We're just seeing more, I guess, more value being found within the square footage, and that, features like that can enhance the way a room is used and enjoyed.
Yeah, that goes into your creative use of your space, not necessarily needing more space, just finding better ways to use the space you have. All right, well, if anybody else has any questions, I know the chat, nobody really has said anything. If anybody else wants to chime in.
I'll
No?
chime in on one thing. Karen Schneider here. Bob was 110% accurate on everything he mentioned. Did Pam leave the call? Pam and I are trying to put together a build contract right now with a local builder. They want a flex craft room. They want an exercise room. They want a home office. They want not only a fireplace in their great room, but they want that outdoor living space with an outdoor fireplace. They know that they can finish room in the basement at about a third of the cost of making their above grade square footage bigger. That's a great cost savings if you have a buyer, have them finish their basement, have them put some rooms in the basement. It's about a third of the cost of above grade construction. But yeah, the builders are booming. We can't keep specs in inventory. If you have a buyer interested in a spec, don't let them wait until they see it drywalled. It'll be too late. Builders or buyers are buying the spec homes at the framing stage now, which gives them the opportunity to customize it too. Great job, Bob.
Thank you, Karen. We didn't really have time to get into the economics, but there are studies showing that people have saved more money over the last year. Interestingly, whether it's, people are not eating out as much or they're not traveling, millennials in particular have saved more money than they ever have before. And that's the market that's starting to become, the hot, kind of the most likely to be buying or trading up from a pre-owned. And so that combined with the interest rates continuing to stay low, there's a lot of equity in people's homes because they have because the prices for pre-owned homes have gone so far. So there's a lot of people have saved. There's a lot of equity out there, and they're spending that on making their lifestyle better, whether that's a new home or an addition. They're considering that to be a good investment for their money, and that will just continue to push demand. I don't, it's really tough when you start looking at the crystal ball to see, how much further can this go, how much higher. I think nationally they're saying they're not expecting interest rates to increase to a significant amount for at least another year, maybe two. And so, the Fed has indicated that they're not interested in raising the rate. If they do, it'll be 0.25%, maybe, a few months from now, or maybe next year. And so I think we're still in a heavy demand cycle that will continue for another couple of years.
Which just means we're going to have you again in 2022 to discuss the post-pandemic changes.
I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to come back in a year and see if I was right about any of this stuff, or, a lot of it's just borrowed from national projections and surveys. So some of it was my own speculation. If I got anything wrong, you can blame it on me.
There is one more question from Kirsten. She said, how many new homes are being built in St. Joe County per year?
Per year. I think it's You know what? I don't have those survey numbers in front of me. I would hate to give you a wrong answer now that people have been so nice and said nice things about me.
You could, I mean, you can also, if you wanted to, get us that information
I
and then
do.
I can,
Yeah, we do track local permitting information for the county, and I have statewide numbers as well that I have access to. I can tell you that it continues to go up. We hit a high number nationally as well as Indiana and locally. We hit a high number in 2019, and then 2020 was even higher. And I think the projections are to be, just continue to, new home construction is going up, but it's also starting to level off because, like I said, they're already building as much as they can build. So with all of those factors being combined, we're kind of plateauing the capacity of our local building. Brian, I don't know if you have that number. Do you, Brian? Is it 1,200? Does that sound like it's off? Maybe 1,100 homes were built in St. Joe County last year.
I think that might be building permits, Bob, but not necessarily the number of new homes. So probably best.
Right. Well, that's the number that we track is housing starts, which is permits that are pulled. So I don't know if I would be able to tell you how many were completed, but we can give you some information. And I'm happy to share the slides. You can email me. I don't know if I had my email on that last slide. And we've recorded the video, so I'm happy to, do follow-ups with anybody. Just reach out. Shameless plug, if you are not affiliated with the Home Builders Association of St. Joseph Valley, we do have a lot of realtors who are members, and we're happy to, include you on all of the events that we do and all of our education and advocacy efforts. One of the big events that we do every year is the Builder Showcase. It's coming up in May. We're expecting enormous numbers. I think we all agree that the demand for housing and people wanting to see houses, wanting to, sort of tour them is as high as it's ever been. Even during the height of the pandemic last year, we saw record traffic in our homes around our community. So we're expecting another big turnout in May of this year, and information about that will be on our website as well. But you can also visit hbashowcase.com.
is it going to be virtual again?
I think virtual is here to stay. Last year we did a virtual tour on our website in addition to the traditional in-person touring.
Okay.
Both of those were very, very popular. I can't see us ever going back to not having an online version of our traditional tour. So stay tuned for that. Join us if you can.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you, Bob. Yeah, he did say we did record this session, so I'll make sure to send it to everybody along with Bob's contact information. So if anybody has any follow-up or wanted some more numbers or information. And yeah, thank you. We appreciate it. A lot of great information.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.